Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today we're taking a look at three defensive players that really stood out in the preseason game against the Cleveland Browns. But as we head towards joint practices with the New England Patriots, important thing to note, Cam Newton will not be involved. As everyone probably knows, he's not vaccinated. There was some interesting rule with the NFL, and apparently he has to sit out 5 days, so he'll miss the majority of practices and could end up missing the preseason game. So that gives Mac Jones a good opportunity to gain some essential ground and really, hopefully, maybe compete for that starting job. I don't think he's going to get it this year. Maybe he'll get it at the midseason. We'll see how Cam Newton's playing, but he's still a decent enough quarterback where the Giants will get some good work out of this. I think they're going to have more of a lighter practice schedule this week as they prepare for the starters to really take hold during this third preseason game. So most of this week, I think, will be a lot of backups anyway. We're going to be seeing those last evaluations for some roster bubble guys. But there are three players that we did really, really like against the defense, Anthony. And I'll, let you give your take on the Cam Newton situation, this joint practices coming up this week.
Yeah, I just think it's something to take note of, right? That Cam Newton's not going to be there. Of course, we expect to see the starters play on this Sunday evening. Daniel Jones, the starting offensive line, we expect to see them out there. So we also expected to see the Patriots starters as well, including Cam Newton. But now that he has some COVID violation or maybe positive test, I don't remember exactly which one, but he is going to miss these practices and likely miss this preseason game. Now, that could change things for Joe Judge and the Giants. If the Patriots decide not to play their starters, the Giants might also decide to not play their starters as well, because that is something similar to what happened this past week. I believe Daniel Jones was expected to play a little bit against the Browns, but then the Giants heard that Baker Mayfield and the Browns starters weren't playing, so they figured, let's also give our starters a week off here as well. So got to keep that in mind. This could change things for the Giants. I'm not sure exactly if it will. Joe Judge seems pretty confident that he's playing the starters this upcoming preseason game, but still, it is something to keep note of. Cam Newton will not be available during these practices, so it's kind of Mac Jones versus the Giants defense all week. For Patriots fans, that's pretty important. You're going to see Mac Jones go up against one of the league's best defenses, or at least up-and-coming best defenses, because the Giants defense is pretty legit. So this will be a good week for Mac Jones, and it should be a good preseason game for him this upcoming Sunday. And I'm excited to talk about this week and cover this week. I'm really excited for Joe Judge and Bill Belichick kind of reuniting for a week, just to practice together, practice two separate teams together. Interesting dynamic there. Going to be exciting. Everybody knows I'm the leader of the Joe Judge fan club, so I'm excited for all the Joe Judge and Bill Belichick content that we're going to get from this week. Going to be a good one, and of course, definitely excited to recap once again the preseason game versus the Cleveland Browns that just finished yesterday.
Yeah, and there was a lot of good takeaways for us to kind of evaluate and take a look at. One of them, and I cannot say this as enthusiastically as I want to, but Carter freaking Coughlin, my guys. My friends, my family, my Giants family, Carter Coughlin is the real deal. And he is the perfect player for a coordinator like Patrick Graham that likes to be versatile with his alignments, likes to do different things. Carter Coughlin is kind of taking hold as this middle linebacker, but more of a pass-rushing middle linebacker, a weak side linebacker. We saw the Devontae Down story yesterday. Not so good. Terrible in pass coverage, not good against the run. He's a big body. He's like 6'2", like 260 pounds, but he really is just not a good linebacker. He's not a good football player. His football IQ is bad. He's always lagging behind plays. He does not get himself into good positions. Carter Coughlin does. He made a couple of really nice tackles yesterday, and over 2 games, only 47 snaps, mind you. A 7th-round pick from last year, 6'4", 245 pounds, 218th overall selection, over 47 snaps in the preseason. He has 3 tackles, 2 sacks, a quarterback hurry, 7 total tackles, an assist. He hasn't missed a single tackle. He has 6 stops, and he's allowed 4 receptions for 21 yards. So overall, he's been pretty damn good across the board. He hasn't allowed that much in coverage where I'm like, he's a liability. Of course, we want to see him dropping back into coverage more because the Giants did not really use him in that way. They used him more so at the line of scrimmage, playing that middle linebacker spot and blitzing. And he was really good in that way. The Giants really like to use those outside linebackers at times to drop back into coverage, cover the flats, cover those hook routes in the middle. And he can do all those things at a fine level, but his real value is as a pass rusher. And he showed some pretty good moves. He moved an entire guard across the line of scrimmage, and then he just jutted up the middle. Anthony will include the clip in this video, so you'll get to kind of see what we're looking at. Maybe if you didn't see it, it's on my Twitter feed, so go check that out. It's a really good representation of what he has to offer as a pass rusher. And if you're looking at the grades, he graded out 90.9 overall as a pass rusher. His run defense was an 85, and overall he had a 76.3 overall grade. So together, he showed me that he is a asset on this team. He's a playmaker. He's an impact player. He's making this roster for sure. And I can't wait to see how Patrick Graham gets him involved in the defensive scheme, because against mobile quarterbacks, they can use him as a spy. If they want to, they can pair him with Blake Martinez on early downs, because on early downs, you're probably going to see more running plays, which is where I'd like to see Carter Coughlin on the field instead of maybe a Tate Crowder, who's a little bit better in coverage, or a Reggie Ragland. I want Carter to get as many reps as possible, because I think his ceiling is so high. It would be malpractice not to get him more involved, especially as a second-year player, a seventh-round pick. His pass rush is just so good compared to Tate Crowder's, compared to Reggie Ragland. I'd like to see him more in that role. And I think Blake Martinez can fill that zone coverage role kind of at an average level at the very least. They can hide the deficiencies, especially when they're playing those three safety looks with Logan Ryan, Jabril Peppers, and Xavier McKinney. They can fill the gaps in coverage and allow Carter Coughlin to rush the passer, create those double teams, those mismatches, and take advantage of his skill set, Anthony. When you're looking at him, how do you think Patrick Graham will try to get him involved? Do you think he'll play a big impact role this upcoming season?
Yeah, I do. I don't think he's going to be, playing a starting level of snaps, but he's definitely going to be moving around as a rotational pass rusher, of course. And then I think he will, maybe by the end of the season, take over that weak side linebacker role. That position that Tate Crowder is manning right now. Thing is, Tate Crowder is kind of more of a coverage linebacker than Carter Coughlin is. Carter Coughlin with a pass rushing background, kind of, actually similar to a guy like Michael Parsons, who was an edge rusher, and now he's playing linebacker with Dallas, or, he kind of played more linebacker at Penn State despite starting off as an edge rusher. Kind of the same story arc there. Afadi Odenigbo, I think, had like a similar arc, and so did Anthony Barr coming out of college. Same arc, where you're an edge rusher, and then you play some edge rusher, but then you transition over to linebacker. That's kind of what you're getting with Carter Coughlin, and that has shown to be a pretty successful arc for multiple players in the past. There's been a lot of players that have found great success making that transition from the edge to the inside linebacker position. So I do feel pretty confident in Carter Coughlin. I think he's got tremendous football IQ, really smart player, great instincts, and that's why he's finding so much success as a pass rusher and against the run. He might not be perfect just yet against the in pass coverage, but I think that's something that he will develop. You got to keep in mind he is still just a second-year player. He is working with one of the best defensive minds in the league right now in Patrick Graham, so I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to develop Carter Coughlin, make him more than competent in pass coverage. But right now, what we're getting from him as a pass rusher, as a QB spy, QB contained type player, and as a run defender, super, super impressive for a guy who has never played the inside linebacker position at the fullest extent that he's playing it now. So very confident in Carter Coughlin. Do expect to see him on the field quite a bit during the regular season, and I do expect him to have a pretty decent impact on the defense this year.
100% agree, and I hope that he does, because what we saw with his pass rush moves, he really cleaned up nicely in the interior. And when you have those big interior defensive tackles like the Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence's, and you have Austin Johnson, Danny Shelton, and David Moa, who we're going to talk about in a minute, you have so much attention already being allocated to those interior gaps. And with those big bodies soaking up double teams, guys like Carter Coughlin makes it really easy to just shove those guards off their mark. It allows, then you have two guys rushing right up the middle. You have Leonard Williams or Dexter Lawrence coming up the C gaps or B gaps, and then you have Carter Coughlin leading the charge because he just pushed off that guard. We're going to see a lot of really creative ways that Patrick Graham can get him involved, and I think he's going to be a pretty good asset for us. I could see him, 5+ sacks on the season, which is a pretty good number for a player that was a 7th-round pick last year. And this transition to middle linebacker, inside linebacker, has been a really big success for him. I think this is exactly what he needed to really take that next step. And the Giants were just, proactive. They weren't like, we're just going to stagnate and hold him at outside linebacker. We're going to move him and get the most out of a player who has a lot to offer this defense. But the next player we want to talk about is 6th-round pick out of Oklahoma State, Rodarius Williams. Now, last week against the Jets, Rodarius Williams had some struggles, right? We know he gave up a couple of yards. He gave up 8 receptions on 10 targets for 99 yards. So he had himself a pretty poor performance. He's a pretty good tackler. He's a physical guy, 6 foot, 195 pounds. But I will say this, he needed to show more in coverage, and he did just that. He bounced back in such a strong way, and that was exactly what we needed to see from the 6th-round pick to make this team. 6-rounders are not guaranteed roster spots. They are late-round picks for a reason, and Rodarius Williams, in my opinion, has proved to us that he can be a solid player. He was playing in the slot. He was playing on the boundary. He was playing at safety at times because Quincy Wilson and Majay Harper both left with individual injuries. But yesterday, he had 15 snaps at slot corner. He had 14 at wide corner. He had 21 at free safety. So he actually played more in the slot than he did out wide. The Giants are trying to figure out if he has more value than just essentially being a boundary corner, and I think he does. He had one fantastic rep where he had no support, no help over the middle, and he stuck to the receiver running a drag route across the middle from the slot just brilliantly. He had another nice pass breakup from the slot on a tight end, a much bigger body who was in front of him, and he just whacked his hands down right in front of the tight end and dislodged the football, created an incompletion. He only allowed 2 receptions for 35 yards. He had a much, much better game. I was really excited to see that because we've been high on Rodarius Williams. We spoke to him in an interview after the draft, and he's a really high character guy, just a great person. And he's doing it for his daughter. He wants to be a great player, and I think he has what it takes. And Joe Judge said it best. He just needs more reps, basically. All he needs is more reps, and he's getting those reps to showcase his abilities, Anthony. Were you also excited to see, him take this next step forward? He looked pretty good in the slot, which is a good case for him to make this roster, especially with Aaron Robinson they want him to be more of that money backer role.
Yeah, I think it's especially good for him just considering how important it is to be versatile in this defensive scheme that the Giants run. So if Rodarius Williams does have the ability to play both on the outside and on the inside, that's going to be huge for him in terms of making this a 53-man roster. Because for any roster bubble player, sometimes it's not what can you do, it's how much can you do. And if you can do more than another player, you can play outside, inside, and contribute on special teams, then you're really going to solidify a roster spot over a guy who might just be strictly an outside or strictly an inside guy. So Rodarius Williams definitely boosted his stock, just showing that he can play more than one position on the defense. So that was huge for him. And of course, in terms of his actual performance, just taking into account that he allowed 2 catches on 3 targets, but he also came away with a pass breakup and 6 tackles. Really solid performance. You look at last week's game, really not a solid performance. I thought he was getting beaten coverage all the time. So it's important. I said, going into the game when we said our specific players that we're keeping an eye on, for Rodarius, I wanted to see him bounce back. There were some players who played really well in week 1. I wanted to watch them build on that. For Rodarius, that wasn't the case. I wanted to see him bounce back from what I believe to be a poor performance, and I think he did just that, and that's really crucial for him. I think he did a phenomenal job. He didn't let the pressure get to him. He didn't, get his confidence shaken, because this is a guy who's just ultra confident, and that's basically his number one trait, is just how confident he is. He oozes confidence. He's really motivated, dedicated to the craft, and I wanted to make sure that he continues that going into this next week, not get his confidence shaken by a poor performance in his first preseason game, bounce back with a strong performance in his second preseason game. I feel he did exactly that, and that's what got me so excited by him on Sunday.
Yep, and the Giants, with Quincy Wilson picking up a groin injury and Majay Harper going down with an ankle injury, now they're down a couple of depth corners. We don't know how serious those injuries are just yet, but having Rodarius Williams available if you needed him is a big bonus. Of course, you have Julian Love there too, and I'm pretty excited to see what this this defense can do, especially in the secondary with so many good players. But Rodarius Williams, it's always good to have good depth pieces. I think he's shown enough upside to deserve a roster spot because he's only going to get better, right? You can't, unless something drastic happens and he just falls off a cliff, which I highly doubt happens. He has the work ethic. He's been begging to go up against the Giants' top wideouts in practice. That's what the coaches says. He's a little even ahead of himself. He's talking crap. He's trying to get after the top guns. And that's how you get better, though. You have to go against the best to get better because it makes your performances against those weaker guys stand out that much more because you're just going up against better guys. So I'm really excited to see what you can accomplish at this next level. But the next player we want to talk about is David Moa. So former Minnesota Viking, a Boise State product from 2020. He's an undrafted free agent, 6'3", 275 interior defender. Yesterday, he collected 5 total tackles. Imagine, hopefully, 5 total sacks would be insane. 5 tackles, 1 hit, 4 quarterback hurries, 3 assists, and he did miss 2 tackles. He also had 2 stops. But for the most part, he showed me that he can rush the passer pretty well from that interior defensive spot. He's a pretty good at plugging those gaps in the running game, and he just showed up all over the field. I kept hearing his name, David Moa, stop them. David Moa involved in the tackle, David Moa, and that's really what you want to see. Against the Jets, he had another great performance with 41 total snaps. He was really good in the pass rush, a good tackler, good run defender. I would be surprised if he didn't make this roster. The Giants are really good at coming up with interior defenders who just make an impact, and having him behind Danny Shelton, having him behind Austin Johnson, he can play that 3-tech, he can play nose tackle, he can play 2-eye, he can play a variety of different positions. If you're going to transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4, he can do it all on the interior of the defensive line. I think having him available would be a benefit. He showed me enough. I think he'll get some more reps next week against the Patriots, and hopefully if he has another positive performance, I think the Giants will keep him around. They do like to have a good, steady rotation of interior defenders, Anthony. Is David Moa a guy you think is on the roster bubble, or does he need to show a little bit more? He's only, it seems he's only 20 years old, so he's really young. I think he might be worth sticking, giving a roster spot to and seeing what he can do.
Yeah, I do think that he's still on the bubble and has a little bit more to prove, but he is trending in the right direction and playing really well. So as you mentioned, he is only 20 years old, very young guy, can definitely be stashed away on the practice squad and kept around on the team through that means. But he is just playing well enough to where he might slip onto the final 53-man roster. We'll see, but there's nothing to really set that in stone just yet. A couple good preseason games, a couple good practices. For some players who are a little more established and a little more proven, that might be enough to get them on the roster spot, especially if maybe they were invested a draft pick into. But David Moa, that's just not the case. So he's a guy who, while we're very hopeful, can continue to build on these performances and make the 53-man roster. Just logistically, especially considering how much depth the Giants have on the interior of their defensive line, or at least how much talent they have, it might not be a lock for David Moa just yet. I think he might still have to continue to prove himself over these final weeks of practice heading into the regular season. But again, I am really impressed with what I've seen from David Moa, a guy I didn't know anything about until these last 2 preseason games, but I do just keep seeing him burst through the offensive line and getting into the backfield. He's just back there quite consistently, a little more consistent than you would expect any backup defensive lineman to be. So when he's back there so consistently and he just keeps popping up like that, you take note of that, you notice that, and you see, okay, David Moa's in the backfield this time. Okay, he's there again. Okay, he's here one more time. All right, let's take note of that. Keep an eye on David Moa going forward. This is a guy who's definitely working really hard right now and earning a roster spot as we speak.
Yeah, and I think that age actually stands out a lot to me because when you have a 20-year-old player making an impact, even in preseason games, that just has a lot of upside. Rodarius Williams is 24 years old, and he was just drafted. At least, Moa has been in the league for a year. So that age, that 20 years old, he's not even done developing yet as a human being. So I think that there's upside there. I would keep him around. I think he has a lot of potential. Even if he's a practice squatter, don't let him go. But I think he's probably on that roster bubble. He could end up making the roster. Maybe not. Depends if they want to add another player to a specific unit, whether it be the offensive line or the secondary. We will see. But I think he's a guy with upside that I'd like to have at least on the practice squad at the very least. So one more player that we do want to talk about who really, really looked good yesterday and finally making this comeback, right? After missing last year with an injury to his shoulder, I guess it was a labrum injury, kept him out from the majority of the season, Oshane Ximines. Oshane Ximines, out of Old Dominion, really hasn't lived up to the expectations that we expected from him. He was a 3rd-round pick. But yesterday, welcome back, Oshane. 5 total pressures on 18 pass rush snaps, 2 hurries, 2 QB hits, and a sack. He had an 86.7 pass rush grade, the first time he's had a grade that high since week 4 of last year. So overall, I think Oshane Ximines probably going to make this roster. I think he has so much untapped potential. The fact that Sam Beal has made it this far, I would say Oshane Ximines probably is going to make the roster. I was really, really impressed by him. He showed some really nice moves on the outside, some solid bend, some solid speed. He beat the crap out of the Browns' backup left tackle. That was a positive sign for me. With Ifeadi Odenigbo kind of not playing as well as you'd hope, Trent Harris is already above him on the roster, on the unofficial depth chart. I think that Oshane Ximines probably has himself a good opportunity to make this roster and be an impact rotational player next year. I think Azeez Ojulari and Lorenzo Carter will be the primary outside linebackers. But Ocean Ximenez, man, do not sleep on him. I remember a while ago I accidentally connected him with Osi Umenyiora, and I think he maybe learned a thing or two because he's coming back. He's looking strong. He's looking good. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more next week against the Patriots. But if he does come back and show us another good performance against the Pats, I'm going to be really optimistic about him not only making the roster, but being a good impact player for this team next season.
Absolutely, 100%. You mentioned 5 pressures, which is kind of a ridiculous number, especially considering that it is a preseason game. Everybody's playing a limited number of snaps. They're not playing from start to finish. 5 pressures in a full game for any pass rusher would be tremendous. And he didn't even play a full game. It's not like he played quarter 1 to quarter 4. Like, there was a rotation going on because they're trying to get their eyes on all these different players at once. So it's not even like he was playing like a starter just from start to finish in a 4-quarter game in the regular season. Now, of course, it also isn't the regular season, so he's not going up against the best of the best competition, so keep that in mind as well. But just to see Ocean Ximenez just bouncing back, looking like a much improved player compared to what he was in the past, is an encouraging development considering that he is coming off of an injury, a significant injury as well, that kept him sidelined for more than half of a season. So very important to see him bouncing back. I know he did have that sack when the quarterback tried to scramble away. I thought that was really good pursuit. I actually thought that the quarterback had the angle. I thought he was going to get by him, but Ocean Ximenez just kind of beat him to the spot and made a phenomenal play. I think it was a 3-yard loss. Really impressive pursuit speed there. And I think he was kind of playing the QB spy. I don't even think he was pass rushing on that snap, which is why I was surprised. I was like, oh, who was that? Oh, it was Ocean Ximenez. Because he was kind of playing more of a linebacker role, playing a QB spy. He wasn't playing that edge rusher role and blitzing off the tackles. So I was surprised by that, and then I was really impressed by that once I realized who made the play. I was like, oh, that was Ocean Ximenez doing that, kind of getting a little out of position, kind of doing something a little different to what he's used to, usually just being a standard every down edge rusher, but instead now I see him moving around a little bit more, playing a QB spy on that play is what it looked like to me. Maybe I have to rewatch it, but that's what I saw, instant analysis of it, and yeah, I'm super impressed with Ocean. I do think that he is going to be one of the starting outside linebackers this upcoming season, at least until Azeez Ojulari develops and comes along into his own role. But for now, I think, you're going to look at Lorenzo Carter if he's healthy as a starter. And then Ocean Ximenez was the starter last year. We had some question marks because he wasn't playing at his best ability last season before he got injured. Then he did get injured. So we did question, will he be starting again at the start of this season? Now I think we can pretty confidently say, yeah, I think he will be, because this does look like a player who might have even improved since the last time we saw him. So that's really encouraging. I think Ocean Ximenez is a great guy, great story to follow. Was a 3rd-round draft pick, first player ever drafted out of his tiny school of Old Dominion. So definitely a player that you want to root for, want to see succeed. And so far, he's finding some pretty good success in this league considering where he came from. And so far, he is continuing to improve, continuing to develop. And I think that he is going to be a starter this year and have a pretty good impact on this defense.
Yeah, and we know that Ocean Ximenez has been working with Lorenzo Carter this offseason, using kind of boxing training to improve his hand speed, improve his hand placement, and really just get more, reactive with the way he uses his hands. And I think it showed out against Cleveland for the most part. So really optimistic about him. I want to see some more, obviously, until I am fully convinced that he can be an impact player, but I think he has what it takes. He's a guy that really just needs to stay healthy. Majority of these players for the Giants that have so much potential just need to stay healthy, whether it's Carter, whether it's Ximenez, whether it's John Ross, whether it's Saquon Barkley. So many players here with so much freaking potential just can't stay healthy, and if they can do that, I think we're going to see this team really take a step forward this year, hopefully get to double-digit wins, my friends. But I hope you enjoyed this video breaking down 3 players, really 4 players with Ximenez on the defense that stood out. I hope you really enjoyed the analysis and everything we had to offer. Obviously, I have the full game recap, yesterday instant analysis after the game, so go check that out. And of course, the full game highlights on the YouTube channel, so you can go check that out as well if you didn't catch the game. But make sure to subscribe below on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow for the next Giants video.
TVSO.